In this video, I will be describing the conduction system and how it controls a cardiac cycle, and later on, blood and the different types of blood vessels. One cardiac cycle is one beat of the heart. During this, there is a relaxation process and a contraction process. During the relaxation process, the heart's atriums fill with blood. This is known as diastole. And during the contraction process, the heart's atria and ventricles contract. This is known as systole. Our heart has a conduction system. This effectively coordinates the contractions of the heart. During the diastole process, this system is inactive. It plays a role during systole, when the heart is actually contracting. An impulse travels from the sinoatrial node, also known as the SA node, down to the atrioventricular node, also known as the AV node, which then travels down the septum through the bundle of His and down the bundle branches on the left and the right, and then finally into the Purkinje fibers, which creates ventricular contraction. The heart's conduction system controls its cardiac cycles. As I said earlier, the conduction system does not play a role during diastole. The left and right atriums of the heart passively fill with blood. This is known as atrial diastole, and the blood flows in via the vena cava and the pulmonary vein. At this point, the bicuspid and tricuspid valves are shut. The pressure forces these valves to open, and the ventricles then passively fill with 70% of the blood from the atriums. This is known as ventricular diastole. An impulse from the SA node then causes atrial systole, and the rest of the blood flows from the atriums into the ventricles. This is active filling. The tricuspid and bicuspid valves are now closed. The impulse then arrives at the AV node, which travels down the bundle of His and then spreads up through the Purkinje fibers, which forces the blood through the aortic and pulmonary valves into the systemic and pulmonary systems. The blood from the left ventricle goes to the body to provide our muscles with nutrients and vital oxygen, while the blood from the right ventricle goes to the lungs. So therefore, the blood that's gone to the body is now deoxygenated and goes into the right atrium, and the blood that has gone to the lungs is now oxygenated but goes to the left atrium, so the cardiac cycle can then happen again. Our autonomic nervous system is influenced by demand changes and therefore influences the SA node and therefore our heart rate. Feedback from the body goes to our brain. Feedback comes from different receptors in the body. We can have chemoreceptors, which detect changes in CO2, lactic acid and oxygen. Thermoreceptors, which detect heat. Baroreceptors, which detect stretch caused by pressure, which therefore detects blood pressure. And we have proprioceptors, which are found in muscles, tendons and joints, so these detect movement. Once the impulse has reached the brain with the information, it goes to the cardiac control center, which is located in the medulla oblongata. This is where unconscious thoughts and decisions are made. There are two main nerves, depending on whether the body wants to excite or inhibit our heart rate. These nerves are what control the decision. There's the accelerator nerve, and this excites the SA node, so therefore speeds up our heart rate. And we have the vagus nerve, which inhibits the SA node, therefore slowing our heart rate down. Our autonomic nervous system has two branches. Each of these nerves is part of one of them. The accelerator nerve is part of the sympathetic branch, and the vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic branch. Hormones such as adrenaline stimulate how fast our heart beats as well. For example, when we get excited or nervous about something, our body releases adrenaline and makes our heart rate increase. Now I'm going to discuss blood and blood vessels. The function of blood is to carry vital nutrients such as glucose, vital gases such as oxygen and hormones to the muscles of the body so they can function, but also to remove waste products such as lactic acid and carbon dioxide. And the job of blood vessels is to transport this blood to where it needs to go so it can deliver and remove these things. Our blood consists of four main components. These are plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Plasma is a straw-coloured liquid, and this is what carries the solids in our blood, and these are all the other components of our blood. So white blood cells and platelets, and the red blood cells. It makes up 55% of our blood, and 90% of it is water. Red blood cells are produced in our red bone marrow, and these are what gives our blood its red colour. It contains hemoglobin, and this is what allows oxygen to be transported in our blood. They live for 120 days and are then replaced, and these make up 45% of our blood. Our white blood cells are made in bone marrow as well, our lymph nodes and our spleen. They are 3 times the size of red blood cells, and their main role is to fight infection to protect our bodies. Finally, our blood's platelets, and these are formed in bone marrow as well, and their role is to clot our blood. Combined, our platelets and white blood cells make up about 1% of our blood. In order to transport our blood, we have blood vessels. There are 5 main types: arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules, and veins. Like any other parts of our body, their structure links to their function. Arteries have a thick muscular wall and an elastic layer in order to expand as the blood surges through them and then to recoil after. They are controlled by our sympathetic nervous system. The blood from these is under high pressure and velocity as it has been ejected from the heart. Therefore, why they need to change dilation quickly. They carry the blood away from the heart. Arterioles are tiny branches of arteries. In this image, they are the red straps wrapped around the artery. They lead into the next vessel, which are capillaries. These are also controlled by a sympathetic nervous system. They have the ability to vasoconstrict and vasodilate, so therefore they are very important in the distribution of blood. They are our main regulators of our blood flow and blood pressure. They dilate to reduce our blood pressure and constrict to increase it. The next vessel are capillaries. These are extremely narrow. They are supplied with blood from the arterioles and drained by venules. These vessels are extremely important as they supply the body with gases, nutrients, and remove waste. For example, they diffuse oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, and salts between the blood and organs. Our blood pressure and blood flow are much lower in these as the total surface area of the capillaries is very large. They are only 1 cell thick, which means they have a very short distance for gases to travel during diffusion, and therefore, as there are so many of them, they have a very large surface area. Venules are very small vessels. They're large capillaries, but smaller than veins. They unite together to form veins. They drain blood from our capillaries into the veins, so the blood, which is now deoxygenated, can return to the heart. The final vessel is veins. Their walls consist of 3 layers of tissue. However, they are thinner and less elastic than arteries, and they also have valves that aid in the return of blood to the heart by preventing backflow. So their function is to transport the blood towards the heart. They also have a large lumen to allow the blood to return towards the heart and therefore have a low blood pressure. So that is the conduction system and how it's controlled by a cardiac cycle, and blood and the different types of vessels.